Howdy.
There's something that I have to attend to real quick, like in all honesty. Can I be on Zoom so I can be like paying attention?
Okay.
On the other side, this one I'm not like I'm being 100% honest.
Okay. Right. How are y'all doing? This is my second class today, so this doesn't feel quite as weird as it did the first time, but it still feels weird wearing a thing over my head. And probably the mask doesn't look as weird, but I really can't talk with mask, and so this is easier to talk, although this is like an echo chamber, so I get to hear myself, which is interesting. We will be, since this is a small class, as you can see, everybody gets to be here every class period. But because you are encouraged to not come if you think you might be sick, we will be Zooming it every class period. And if you attend by Zoom, that is, you are present. So don't come if you might be sick. A couple of things to go over first. Related to COVID-19, everybody I see knows you have to wear a mask. You have to wear it properly, covering your mouth and your nose. You can't eat or drink in class because you can't do that with mask. Guests are not allowed on campus. The exams, since the room is large enough for us to all take it at the same time, we won't have any issues about taking the exam, except for the last one. You probably heard that after Thanksgiving, everything is going to be remote. So the last week, we do have classes, but it will be by Zoom, and that will be important material, but we will not be meeting here. And the final exam will be remote, which means it'll be proctored, and that means that there'll be a cost to you of paying for the proctoring. I don't know for sure what that cost is going to be at this point. We have two different options for how we proctor. One is a little cheaper than the other one. So I'm not going to make a decision on what to do yet, because in the spring, we also, as you know, we had to switch to remote proctoring, and I used the cheaper version at that time, and it caused enormous problems. There's a new, the version we're considering, or the format for proctoring we're considering now is different. So it may work out great, but I'm hoping that there'll be other teachers who use that early in the semester, and we can find out if it works. And if it does work and it's cheaper, we will go with that. Yeah.
Is this the same as the ProctorU service?
There is the two we're considering are ProctorU Live and Mobile Proctor. The one that didn't work very well, we're not considering. So there are two options that are being used or considered. And I've used ProctorU before, and it works great. It's just a little, I think it would be around $20 for an exam. And the other mobile proctor, I believe, is around 13. So if we can save you some money, we will do that. But I have personal experience that trying to save money can really lead to problems, because I had people with the ProctorU review that would spend hours trying to get it to work. And
I had a class during the summer And my proctor, I set the proctor U exam. I set the date just as the class started, and a week before the final, I get an email a couple, 3 days later that says, hey, your proctor U appointment's been canceled. You're shit out of luck. So I felt
Yeah, well, Proctor, you had a lot of problems in the spring and some in the summer because, well, why do you think they have problems?
there's so many people wanting to use the limited service.
All over the country, everybody's switching to proctoring, and Proctor U was the main supplier, and they took on more business than they could really handle. But it was an instructive experience because most of this was with Proctor U Review Plus, which we will not be using. But I really learned something useful that I think can help you, and that is that most of the problems people had, it wasn't really Proctor U's fault. It was that to get it to work right, you had to follow the instructions very carefully. And there was a certain point in those instructions where it was easy to go astray. And that was the main problem people had. In fact, I spent 6 weeks trying to get the instructions exactly right, and they still had trouble. And the reason is because they would go through it, but then they get to a certain point, and then they would say, oh, I know what to do now. And they would stop following the instructions. And that's exactly the problem people have in economics. They start working through a problem, and then they get to the point where they say, oh, I know what the answer is. And so they stop reasoning. They just go with their intuition, which is exactly what will lead you to the wrong answer. So we'll come back and talk about this more later, but in economics, as in a lot of life, you have to resist your intuition, because what seems intuitively plausible often is the wrong thing. And economics teaches you to reason slowly and reason carefully, and not be attracted to things that sound good and look good, but if you think about it for just a little bit, you say, no, this is not a good idea at all. Okay. Office hours, I should say that I will be having office hours. I will not be having office hours in my office because our offices are pretty small. And so I will not be meeting with students in the office. I can, when you have questions or something you want to talk about, whatever, we can talk before class in this room. We can talk after class. You can use my bookings link and make an appointment, and we can set a time and decide on a place. There are empty rooms that we can use. There's the conference room in this building, so we can meet face to face. We just won't be doing it in my office. Also, well, we can meet face to face on Tuesdays and Thursdays. On Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, I do have office hours, but they will be by Zoom, phone, or email. So if you want to meet with me during one of those times, you can make an appointment, or you can just you can use my Zoom link, and I'll just be sitting somewhere, I plan to have my Zoom personal room open, and so you can just click on the link and I'll be there. So it'll actually be easier to contact me that way than actually coming up to the office. All right, let's go ahead and call the roll. Let's see, Rafael Bastos. Nope. Catherine Brown. William Dagerfont. Okay. Grant Darter. Hayden Dufour. Matthew Gallagher. Patricia Lewis. Okay. Abigail Swallow. Sarah Vidrine. Sarah Watson. Dylan West. Okay. Anybody I did not call? What's your name? All right. Okay. Next thing, is anybody who has not had any economics? Everybody's had macro. Okay, that's good. That's good. Because in, if you recall, in macro, the first 4 chapters were introduction to economics and then supply and demand. Supply and demand is really microeconomics, but you have to learn that before you can do macro. So you've already been exposed to some micro. And then in this class, rather than go back and repeat all of that, I assume that you learned something and remember some of that. We will be beginning in chapter 4, which you've already seen before. But if you're like most people, you really can use a review. So the first assignments will be for chapter 4, which is the second part of supply and demand. And I will be reviewing that on Thursday. If you remember supply and demand and you think, yeah, I didn't really feel comfortable with that, then you should probably go back and reread and maybe do some of the chapter 3 sapling assignments as well. Okay. Those are all the sapling assignments for chapters 1 through 3 are available in sapling, but they're kind of at the end. Okay. I've got, the way I have it listed is it starts with in sapling. Well, I'll show you.
Will doing the chapters 1 through 3 assignments affect our grade, or are they just?
No. No, the things that you'll be graded on start with chapter 4. Okay. So only do anything for the first 3 if you think you need it. Okay, well, before we go to sapling, I'll just, here's the ECON page in Moodle. We've got announcements. If you are not well and you need to attend by Zoom, you click here, and that's how you will access those meetings. If there's something you didn't understand, you want to see the recording of it, you can go in there. That will show up there as well. Of course, syllabus is here. Let's just go ahead and go over that. You'll notice the You won't find me in my office on Monday, Wednesday, or Friday, but I am available by email. The textbook, same textbook as in macro, and so if you took macro here and you did it within the last 12 months, then you should not have to pay for access to that. Also, there have always been some people who had problems getting registered with Sapling, and we finally figured out that it was a problem with LSUA's email security. And so we should not have, that's why the confirmation emails from Sapling wouldn't arrive. So it wasn't really Sapling, it was LSUA's email that was the problem. So that was fixed, so you shouldn't, I don't think you'll have any trouble registering with Sapling, and you shouldn't have to pay anything. You probably already know, but a lot of things you find on a course syllabus are there not really because the teacher wants it there, but because we're required to put a lot of stuff in it. So I'll touch on the things that are actually important. Here, this is useful. These are the chapters that we will be covering. Starting out with a review of supply and demand. And then very quickly in chapter 5, we're building on supply and demand. So that supply and demand model is just really, really important for the rest of the course. And it's really important for understanding the world. If you understand it and you apply it to what's going on in the world, it can give you insights that about things that just totally mystify people. For example, back in March, mid-March, when you went to the store and you wanted to buy toilet paper, what did you find?
Bare shelves.
Bare shelves. You wanted paper towels, bare shelves. And not just the store you went to, all over town, bare shelves for weeks, maybe months, bare shelves. And this just totally fascinated me how people responded to that, because I heard people say, well, it's just, people are just irrational. They just panic, and so they want something that they feel like they're in control of, so they rush to the store to buy toilet paper. And I heard a number of theories as to what was going on. Why was there a shortage of toilet paper? Demand. You hear things like that, and it's absolutely true that demand increased because people were going to be spending a lot more time at home, so you need more toilet paper at home. So demand increased. That's part of it. And what happened to supply? Well, no, don't. Before you get to the price, supply went down because supply chains were disrupted, and you had processing places, manufacturing places where workers were sick and they couldn't produce as much. So you've got an increase in demand, you've got a decrease in supply. As we will talk about in chapter 4, under equilibrium, we will not say when demand increases and supply decreases, then you get a shortage. We will say the price goes up. You have a new equilibrium where the quantity supplied and the quantity demanded are equal. Why didn't that happen? Why didn't the price go up? From an economic perspective, the shortage was not caused because there was more demand, and wasn't caused because there was less supply. It was caused because the price didn't go up. So the really interesting question is, why didn't the price go up? Producers could have raised their prices. And if they had, there would have still been toilet paper on the shelves. So it is an interesting question. Why didn't they raise their price? Can you think of a reason they might not raise their price? I'm sorry? When you have a situation like this, okay, then we have laws that are intended to protect consumers. They are to prevent what? What is it called? Price gouging. We have laws that say that when you have some kind of disaster, crisis, it is illegal for the producers to raise their prices to protect the consumers. Okay? But also one possibility is that they didn't raise their prices because they were afraid that they would get in trouble with the government. Okay? That no doubt is part of it. But I think it's even more complicated that if you go to the store and you hear that it's hard to get toilet paper, and so you go to your favorite store and you're relieved to see lots of toilet paper, it's okay, and then you take it to check out, and for a package of 4 rows of toilet paper, it's $40. What are you going to think? How are you going to feel? You're going to feel like, what? You're taking advantage of me. This is wrong. You shouldn't be doing this. And that's the way people feel. They feel like, well, I need this. You're going to benefit by raising the price, so you shouldn't benefit because of my problem. And so a producer could rationally say, it really would be some benefits to us of raising the price. We'd make more profit. Our consumers would be able to get the product they want. But that producer may say, but we're not going to do it because the goodwill of our customers is really important. And if we raise the price, and we have a loyal customer who says, I thought you were better than this, and they change their view of you, then it could really hurt you permanently. And I think that was a big part of it, that people resent a price increase. Even people who sit through a whole economics course and know that an increase in demand and a decrease in supply will raise the equilibrium price, people still feel like that's just not right. And people tend to go with their feelings rather than their analysis. Okay? And one of the really important parts of this course is to develop an appreciation for the analysis and really apply it to your life so that you don't forget it when you walk out of the classroom, because a lot of people do. If everybody really understood economics, there would not have been nearly the problem we had with toilet paper, with a lot of other stuff. Okay? One of the reasons You may be thinking, why are we talking so much about toilet paper? It's just a good example of what happened for other things. One of the reasons that the demand increased so much was that a rational person would say, they're not going to raise the price. There's going to be a shortage. If you think there's going to be a shortage of something, what do you want to do now? You go buy as much as you can. If they had let the price go way up, then people would not have, filled up their carports with toilet paper. Okay? It would have stayed in the store, and you would be able to get it when you wanted it. Okay? And the price probably wouldn't have gone up all that much. But because they felt like they couldn't raise the price, people said they're going to be shortages. I got to stock up now, and that led to a big shortage. And it's not just toilet paper; it's all kinds of things. This webcam, when we LSUA went remote, second half of the spring semester, and have all these, you were probably one of them, all these students who suddenly have to have a webcam because you're Zooming. So where do you get a webcam? Well, if you're like me, you automatically go to Amazon. Okay? And Amazon did have webcams you could get. I already had this one. I bought it about 7 years ago. I paid I think it was $79 7 years ago. In the spring, when I had students asking me, well, what kind of camera do we need? I thought, well, I'll look and go back in my order history and see if that kind of camera is still available. And it was. You could get a used camera just like this one for $300. Now, your first thought is, that's not right. But why was the price high? It's because demand increased. One way to say it. But another way to say it is you had more people wanting cameras than there were cameras available. So how are you going to allocate the cameras that are available? Well, you use the price, then the people who are willing to pay the most for it, they get it. The people who don't really need it that much don't get it. Okay? Plus, if you let the price go up, the quantity available will go up. Okay? I had 2 cameras. Okay? I didn't have to have 2 cameras. Okay? I had 2. I could have sold one so that somebody else could use it. Okay? But I thought, well, it's good to have a backup. I could make $300, but I better hold on to it because I might need that backup. If the price had gone to $500 to $1,000, I would have decided I can do without the backup. I would have sold the camera, and somebody who really valued it highly would have been able to get it. But because the price wasn't that high, I decided, no, I'm not going to make it available to somebody else.
The higher price would incentivize the selling of the
Yeah. And Amazon got in trouble on a lot of products because the price did go up, and they were accused of price gouging. But that camera that was selling for $300, if Amazon had said, no, that's gouging, we're not going to let you do it, then people who really, really valued a camera highly would not have been able to get it. You let the price go up, you don't have shortage. When I was getting ready to teach from home in the spring semester, I realized that my Zooming wasn't working very well over Wi-Fi. It would freeze up and then it would die. And I realized, I need a longer Ethernet cable. I need like 100-foot Ethernet cable. Am I going to be able to find one? So I go to Amazon, you know, 100-foot Ethernet cable. There's all these cables listed. You know, you get them pretty cheap, right? But, available, 2 months, 3 months, 1 month. All of them that I'm looking at are not going to be available for a long time. So I went to the top of the page, and instead of selecting featured or price low to high price, I switched it to high price to low price. Okay? And when I did that, I saw a different ranking, and I saw 100-foot Ethernet cables that I could get within 2 or 3 days. But the price was a lot higher because they were able to charge, because some of them were able to charge a high price. I was able to get the cable I wanted quickly. If I had been protected, quote, protected from that high price by not allowing the price to go up, then they would have been out and I would not have gotten an Ethernet cable. Anyway, there are just so many examples. With the pandemic, so many choices we have to make that are different from what we normally do. And so there are just so many examples now of how should we go about making choices? What are the consequences of making choices differently? If you just quickly, without thinking, say, let's protect consumers, keep the price down, you end up hurting a lot of consumers that you didn't intend to hurt. Economics teaches you to slow down and think carefully. If we do this, what is actually going to be the effect of it? Okay. On down. You do need to be here. You do need to attend, but by attend, I mean, if you're here physically or if you're there by Zoom, then that does count as attendance. The exams, if you were in my other class, as far as how you will be graded, it's going to be pretty much the same thing. There will be 4 exams. The questions on the exams will be intended to determine, do you understand the concepts that we have been developing and that you've been studying in the videos and in class and in sapling. And if you understand those concepts, if you use those concepts, then you should do well on the exam. If you're just trying to remember stuff that you didn't really understand, you're not likely to do well. The equation for calculating your grade is the same as before. 80% counts is based on your 4 exams. Then the other 20% is your sapling average times your attendance factor, which is the percentage of class periods that you're here, and then times a weight of 20% plus B. So B is a bonus. To get the bonus, you can get a bonus of 4% or 6%. You have to, as you watch the Marginal Revolution University videos, probably remember those from macro. As you watch those, take notes, submit the notes. That's the first requirement. Then on sapling, you have to have at least an 80% on sapling to get the 4% bonus, or 90% to get the 6% bonus. And then you do have to demonstrate that you are taking the course seriously, which means If you don't do well on the first exam, you fail the first exam, then you got to do something. You got to figure out what do I need to do differently. So talk with me, and we'll look at what you missed, figure out what you need to do differently, and you do that, then you can still qualify for the bonus, no matter what you made on the first exam. And that bonus can make a big difference in your grade. You can read over this. I won't take the time to do it in class today. For submitting your notes, here it says you can do it online or you can bring it to class. Since we are trying to minimize transmission of paper and germs, then we won't be doing the turning it in class, but so I can explain if you have any trouble how to upload to Moodle. People have found some very useful ways of doing that. You can take, for example, if you take your notes on paper, which I think is a good idea, but you don't have to. You can just take 4 pages, just arrange it, take a picture of the 4 pages with your camera, and then upload those pages to Moodle. All kinds of ways you can do it, whatever is. One person who recorded it and would just turn through the pages. That works fine as well. Whatever is useful, but we won't do the turning it in. Let's go on to the sampling assignments. Here, this is going to work the same way as in macro. You'll find this on Moodle. Far left column is the week, and then the chapter, and then the activity. The due date is always on Friday at 7 p.m. There's always a 24-hour grace period. So Saturday evening, I'll look at what you've done. If you're making good progress, then I will allow you to keep working on the activity until the day of the exam, and that's the closing date. Okay? If I look and see you're really not doing anything, okay, then I can give you a 0 for that. And the reason I do that is incentives. I know that if you get behind, you're not likely to be able to catch up. And so keep that in mind. If you have a week that's where you really can't get much of anything done, let me know, because I'm not, I am flexible on this. I just don't want you to get behind, because I see what happens to people who get behind, and it's not good. So these activities that are due Friday nights, they will be available as long as you're making good progress until the day of the first exam, which is September 17th, I believe. All right. Let's see. Once the exam passes, I will not be reopening the sapling activities, because if I start doing that and people start expecting they'll be reopened, and then they don't do them when they need to be doing them. Okay? So once the exam passes, then no more opportunities to do that. Okay. Notice the first exam begins with chapter 4. It's really chapter 3 and 4, because it's the whole supply and demand model. And I will be reviewing supply and demand on Thursday. So whether you go back and look at chapter 3 is up to you. But if you want to be comfortable with supply and demand, because it is just, it's the foundation of everything we do in this course. Okay. Questions so far? All right. I have some time. I want to play you a video. It's a short video. I think it's going to work now.
The astonishing growth and prosperity in the last 2
Second. Here he's talking about prosperity and the improvements that we have seen in recent centuries. And I think that's really important to keep in mind, because we tend, people tend to focus on the negative, and we tend to focus on the short run. And if you're thinking about the short run and you're thinking about negatives, then you've got plenty to focus on and conclude everything's terrible. This is just, the world's just falling apart. And it's very important to remember that that is not the case. If somebody from 100 years ago popped in today through a time machine, they wouldn't be amazed that we're all wearing masks. They would be amazed that, what is this? Where did it come from? We have, so even given the problems we have now, we are still dramatically better off than most people through history. And we should be focusing on, we should be aware of the advantages we still have in spite of things like wearing a face shield, and be focused on what can we do to make things better. It's amazing how often we don't focus on the things that we can control. Government policies. What are the kinds of policies that we can enact which will actually make us better off? We don't like poverty. What are the things we can do that will reduce poverty? To understand that, you have to think about, how do you escape poverty? Well, you escape poverty when you have enough wealth. How do we get wealth? That was the question that Adam Smith asked 200 and something years ago. What is the nature of wealth? The wealth of nations. What causes wealth? Those are really, really important questions. And we need to be thinking about those. We're getting ready to have an election. What kind of policies can be put into effect that will lead to more wealth for society as a whole? Those are really important questions, because if you have the wrong policy, you have the right policies, society becomes more wealthy. People are better off. When you have the wrong policies, things can get a lot worse. And we can be back, you know, in the 1800s with the wrong policies. And so, you know, having the big picture is really, really important. And this is Don Boudreaux. He's at George Mason University, and he same place that Tabarrok and Cowan are, the authors of your textbook. And I think they are I would say the premier economics department in the country, because they are focusing on, you know, what can we do to make people better off. And hopefully we will be able to, before the end of the semester, have Don Boudreaux do a presentation for us. We were in the spring, we were in talks with him to get him to come and do a conference. And right in the middle of planning that, the country shut down. So now we may just try to get him by Zoom, and that hopefully will be a lot cheaper. Okay.
Well, 300 years is one of the greatest events of human time. Take the average human in, say, the year 1000 BC. He's poor, fighting to find food and off diseases. Fast forward 500 years to the time of classical Greece. Still poor, still hungry. How about 1,000 years after that? It's the Dark Ages. Wow, still poor. Then jump to the 18th century and forward. Things change rapidly. This phenomenon is known as the hockey stick of human prosperity. Thinking is surely one of the most important measures of human well-being, life expectancy. Before the Industrial Revolution, life expectancy was around 30 years. Today, in the United States, we expect to live to be about 80. Prior to the Industrial Revolution, 1 in 4 kids would die before the age of 5. Today, in developed countries, it's more like 1 in 200. And better nutrition, we grow to be 4 inches taller than it was 150 years ago. Remember this disease? There you go, because it was eradicated in 1977. Look around. You'll find a roof over your head and a hard floor under your feet. Most of our ancestors lived in huts with dirt floors, thatched roofs. Everything was infested with insects and rodents. Streets and alleys were open sewers. There were bees. The filth was horrible and often toxic. Our ancestors ate food and wore the same homely underwear over and over. Now, even the least fortunate Americans typically get electricity, running water, toilets, refrigerators, televisions, and yes, cheap, washable underwear. Those of us who live in modern industrial society are incredibly, amazingly off the charts rich compared to our ancestors. And here's yet another huge difference between us and our ancestors. Before the Industrial Revolution, people knew how to make from scratch many of the things they consumed. They made a lot of their own clothing, grew most of their own food, and built their own wells. Fast forward to today. And believe it or not, none of us has a hint of how to make the majority of the things that we consume. Just getting ready in the morning involves taking many trips around the globe. Take this coffee, for example. The beans come from Guatemala, and they were brewed in this coffee maker in Switzerland. The container ship that carried the beans was built in Korea. It's insured by a company from London, and it's captained by a Frenchman who loves Turkish cigarettes. We've transitioned from each of us doing many things to each of us doing one thing, to having a job. Only makes sense in a modern world, where each individual typically does only one type of work. So while we mostly only produce one thing, doing one job, each of us now consumes a whole bunch of products that require a whole bunch of jobs to produce. The question of where prosperity comes from launched the field of economics. That's why Adam Smith wrote the first book, Modern Economics, an inquiry into the nature and causes of the wealth of nations. Back in 1776, when he published it, Smith was trying to understand the causes of modern prosperity that was just starting to repeat. Poverty and starvation were still normal, as they had been every day. But in the late 18th century, for the first time ever, the masses began to grow riches once reserved only for the elite. It is this mass prosperity that Adam Smith sought to explain. Why was it happening? What was causing wealth to move from being the exception to being the norm? Now we look around and try to figure out what causes poverty instead of what causes prosperity. You are watching Everyday Economics, a course where we use the lens of economics to explore everyday questions. This section is about trade.
Okay, he was talking about what are the sources of prosperity? Another way to say that would be, what are the different ways we can organize our resources? We've got labor, we've got land, we've got machines, we've got all kinds of resources. We don't have enough resources to produce all the things we want to have. So what is the best way to choose how to use those resources? There are primarily two ways that we can organize our resources. We call this an economic system. Okay? You have a market economy where private individuals own resources, own property, and they get to decide for themselves how they want to use that property. They get to interact with each other in markets. And in markets, as they interact, prices are determined. Okay? And those prices give them information about what is valued and what is not valued. The other main alternative to a market economy is to have a command economy or a socialist economy, where the government looks at the whole economy and tries to figure out what is best for the country as a whole. In a market economy, everybody's making their own decisions. And when you decide how you're going to use your money or your time, are you thinking about, well, what is the best thing that I can do for the country? I got $10. How can I spend this in such a way it's going to be best for the country? Is that what you're really thinking about? No, you're thinking, I've got $10 to spend and I've got all these things I want to buy for myself or for people you love and care about. And you decide, how can I best spend this money to produce these benefits for myself or my family or my friends? You get to make your own decision. You're focusing on what is good for you and for the people you care about. In a command economy, socialist economy, then you have the government making decisions for the whole country. Okay? And two very different systems. And they differ in lots of ways, but two key things that we will keep coming back to is we will talk about incentives and we'll talk about knowledge. Okay? To make good decisions, you have to have knowledge about the consequences of different options. And you have to have incentives. Okay? When you are spending your own money, okay, then you say, okay, I got my $10, I can buy this or I can buy this. And you know what those things are worth to you. And you have an incentive to use that money efficiently. You don't just take your $10 and spend it randomly, because you know if you spend it wisely, you're going to benefit. When you're spending your own money, you know the benefits of using it in different ways, and you have an incentive to use it in a way that is going to be beneficial. When you have government, you have a bureaucrat in government, say in Washington, making the decisions. Okay? how many hamburgers should be produced in Alexandria. Does that bureaucrat, he may have very good intentions, but does he really know what should be produced in Alexandria? No, he doesn't have very good knowledge about that situation. And he doesn't have very good incentives either. Because if he makes a great decision, that will benefit the people in Alexandria. He doesn't really get a benefit. If he makes a terrible decision, then the people in Alexandria suffer. But he doesn't suffer. So the bureaucrat in the command economy generally doesn't have very good information about how to use the resources and doesn't have very good incentives to use those resources wisely. One of the best example of that would be in China during what was called the Great Leap Forward, beginning in the latter part of the 50s, where Mao, he was the supreme leader, so he got to make most of the decisions. And he decided for China to really become a modern country, we need lots of steel, because he looked at modern countries, developed countries, and he said they produce a lot of steel. So he concluded we need to produce a lot of steel. So everybody was commanded to produce steel, and they literally had steel ovens in people's backyards. It really wasn't very efficient. Sometimes people tore off part of their houses to produce the energy so they could produce more steel in order to achieve the quota that they had been given. They collectivized the farming, whereas people before had individual farms where each farmer knew, if I do a good job, I have food, I get to live. If I'm not productive, I'm going to starve. They created collectivized farms where you had 5,000 people on a farm, so that each farmer knew, if I work really hard, it's not going to have much effect on my collective. So they didn't have very good incentives. And literally millions of people died because the supreme leader got to make all the decisions, and he made bad decisions. And the lesson we should learn from that isn't that Mao was a bad guy. He almost certainly was a bad guy. But the important lesson is it was a bad system. It was a system that did not give decision makers the information they needed and the incentives they needed to make good decisions. We'll be talking about those kinds of ideas throughout the course, and they're really, really very important. If you look on in Sapling, let's see if I still have that open. This is actually for macro, but it looks pretty much the same. This has statistics from the Federal Reserve, and thing that's 10.2% unemployment. Well, that's not good. That's high. But look at this one. Real GDP growth, minus 33%. I mean, that doesn't happen. If you told me this was going to happen in early March, I would have said, no, that's not going to happen. Why did that happen? Why did GDP go down so much? The pandemic certainly was really important. But I think we need to distinguish between the pandemic itself and the decision to shut down the economy. Totally separate things. Now, you may believe that it was a good idea to do that. Even if it was, those were totally separate things. And you want to learn to think about these things from the perspective of a market economy versus a command economy. We had a shutdown of the economy because the people at the top said this is the right thing to do, and that it was imposed on the rest of the country. Important question to ask. And I'm not saying that was wrong. I'm saying a very important thing to think about is that there was a choice there. Is the government going to make this decision and impose this command on everybody? Or is the government going to do the research, collect the data, and then give people information and say, this is a big problem. Thousands of people, millions of people could die. And then make recommendations as to what should be done. Don Boudreaux and others similar to him would argue that when you have a pandemic, that doesn't necessarily mean you have to switch from a market economy to a command economy. They would argue you can give people the information about the virus, tell them here's what you can do to be safe, even recommend you should stay home. But then you can allow people to make their own decisions about whether to stay home completely or what. It's a complicated question as to what should have been done. What I'm saying, I'm not saying that they made the wrong decision, but I'm saying we need to think about those decisions and recognize that if people had been given the information and then been allowed to make a choice as to what to do, then people who are older, people who have health problems, they could take extreme steps to avoid getting sick. And people who are younger and don't have health problems would not have to take as extreme action. There are lots of options. The danger is when we simply assume there's only one option, and when we assume that, well, since it's an important situation, we need somebody at the top to make the decision for us. That's a choice. Just like you can choose to have the government decide how many cars to produce, how many eggs to produce. That's one extreme. The other option is to let people make their own decisions. And as we go through this course, we will learn more and more about the consequences of pursuing a market economy versus pursuing a command economy. One more thing I did want to mention. So many things have happened since March. We probably all have missed a lot of them. But one really interesting thing that happened had to do with the price of oil. Anybody know what has happened to the price of oil? It's gone down. It was, I believe, it was around $70 a barrel in early March, and it started going down. And And that makes sense. People aren't driving as much, so demand is lower, the price goes. But how low would you expect it to go? Anybody know how low it went? No. I believe it was April 20th that, I mean, it had been going lower and lower. So I was watching it on the news and in real time. And, you know, it's like, you know, $25, $20, $15, $10. And I'm just like, wow, this is, you know, what's going to happen? And when you're an economist, you're thinking about supply and demand all the time and prices. And so it's interesting. And so I'm watching the graph and it goes from 10 to 5 to 0 to -1, -5, -10, -20. It kept going down to -$37. What does that mean? It means that on that day, producers were paying buyers $37 to take a barrel of oil. Now, see, a lot of people look at that and they think, it's crazy. Things are just crazy. Okay? We should never reach that conclusion in economics. When something happens, there's a reason for it. If you say it's crazy, that means there's no reason for it. Okay? There's always a reason when the price changes. Okay? And I had never thought through it. In early March, somebody asked, I shoot an email, a former student emailed me and said, I heard the price of oil could go negative. And I thought about it and concluded, well, yeah, technically that could happen, but that, you know, I don't think that'll really happen. But it did. Okay? And it makes perfect sense because when you have an oil well that's pumping gas or pumping oil, you can't just turn it off and turn it back on. You can stop it, you can plug it, but if you plug it, that's a costly thing to do. And then reopening it is a costly thing to do. And you may never get it fully open again. So you don't stop it unless you're going to do it, keep it stopped for a significant period of time. So if you're not going to stop it, it's pumping oil. If you're not going to stop it, then that oil is going to keep coming out. What are you going to do with it? It's got to go somewhere. You could put it on a cargo ship. They're called VLCCs, very large something, cargo something, okay? Those normally rent, I believe it's for around $15,000 a day. What do you think happened to the rental price of those cargo ships during this period? It went up. And I've got the numbers I meant to find out, I didn't find. I believe it was up to $120,000 a day. Now, why the owners of those oil wells, why didn't they just cut them off, turn it off? They could have, but they expected the price was going to go back up. So they didn't want to turn it off. And if you don't want to turn it off, then you got to find a place to put it. And you know, I was talking about this with my wife, and she's an artist, but even she was saying, where could we put some oil? You know, if they're going to pay you $37 to take the oil, you have an incentive to find a way to store it. And a lot of people who had not stored oil before found ways to do it. And the price did not stay negative for very long. But it's fascinating that did happen, and it made sense. And there were people in the oil industry who were saying, this is, you know, we can't let this happen. the government has to do something to protect us from this situation. And this is what happens in a free market. Sometimes the price goes up to $150 a barrel, as it did in 2008, and they make tons of profit. And then sometimes they lose a whole lot of money. And in a free market, you don't go to the government and say, protect us. Anyway, we are out of time. Any questions? I didn't cover. All right, if you have questions, let me know.